And then there was not one head coaching vacancy, one true candidate for the silver and black. That plus more comes up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, January 30th, 2026.
You are Locked On Raiders, your daily Las Vegas Raiders podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one sports podcast network. We're very proud of that. We're also very proud of the fact that this show continues to grow each and every day, and that's because of your consistent support and because of the great job that my man Ari does behind the scenes, making sure we look good and sound good each and every day by way of the YouTube page. So shout out to Ari. Fantastic job. You can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. You can hit me up as well at your boy Q254. And if you want to be a part of the show, as many of you do, we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line for you, 707-654-4693. We'll try to get more calls and texts in than we did on Thursday's show. Kind of ran out of time there at the end, so we'll try to keep some of the segments a little bit shorter so we get a little bit more feedback from you. We'll do that in segment number 3 as we close things out. Segment number 2, if it's not Klint Kubiak, then who? That's what we'll focus in on segment number 2. Here in segment number 1, news and notes of the day, and you got it. It's all about the Raiders head coaching search. We'll jump into that after I tell you about the title sponsor of the show. That's FanDuel. It's the last call for football on FanDuel. If you're a new customer, bet just $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. So we know that there's 2 head coaching vacancies, the Cardinals and the Raiders. But after what happened on Thursday, feels like it's really, truly down to one candidate. And this is what happened. Adam Schefter, Thursday afternoon, tweeted out, Broncos passing game coordinator Davis Webb is withdrawing from consideration from the Raiders head coaching job per source. Webb interviewed for head coaching jobs with the Raiders, Bills, and Ravens. Also went on to say Broncos quarterback coach and passing game coordinator Davis Webb called the Raiders earlier today to inform him he's withdrawing from consideration from their head coaching job. The Ravens and Giants have interest in him for their OC jobs, and Denver now has an opening too to promote him into that role. So there you go. Signed, sealed, and delivered. Davis Webb has informed the Raiders that he is not, in fact, in the running for their head coaching job. And all the conversation that we've been having really all week is, all right, Klint Kubiak, the Seahawks offensive coordinator, fallback plan, Davis Webb, passing game coordinator and quarterback coach for the Denver Broncos. Well, now one of those options is off the table. And there could be many different reasons why Davis Webb pulled his name from the consideration. A lot of it probably had to do with the fact that everybody knew it was Klint Kubiak, number one option, and he was going to be the fallback plan. Maybe he didn't want that. Maybe he's talked to someone, and maybe he's going to stay in Denver as be the offensive coordinator, but he does have other options. The Baltimore Ravens and the Giants, they both have interest in him as well to be the OC, and, of course, he's got ties to both those organizations. He knows people in those organizations as well as Denver. Obviously, he's still employed there. So anything could happen as far as where he's going to end up, but where he's not going to end up is in Vegas with the Raiders. So it's nice to have options. Like, I think we all understand Klint Kubiak is the guy. That's the one that everyone wants to get him to be the head coach of the Raiders. But it's really good to have options, especially options that you believe in. Once one of those really good options is off the table, then all of a sudden things change really, really quickly. So Ian Rappaport, NFL Network, tweeted out, before he heads to the Super Bowl, Klint Kubiak will have second interviews with the Raiders and the Cardinals. With Webb out in Vegas, it's likely Kubiak will have the opportunity for one of the remaining head coaching jobs. Well, that's a no-brainer, right? And a lot of, the belief is that Arizona doesn't really have the same opportunity to land Kubiak as the Raiders do. But with that being said, Arizona's going to Seattle to meet with them, and the Raiders are going to Seattle to meet with them. So they might be able to throw a big presentation his way, and he's like, you know what? The Arizona job is a good one. The Raiders, I believe that they're going to throw a big presentation his way. I mentioned it on Thursday's show. I think it's a 5 to 6 year deal, anywhere from around 12 to 13 million a year, maybe even all the way up to 15 million a year for Klint Kubiak. And that might be something that he says, yeah, that's what I want to do. Or he might say, no, you know what? The money sounds good. The opportunity sounds good, but I'm really comfortable being the offensive coordinator here in Seattle. Then I thought my guy Jordan Schultz, NFL insider from Fox, he tweeted out basically a whole entire storyline and a timeline for the Silver and Black where he says, where things stand with the Raiders per sources. They'll meet with Seahawks offensive coordinator Klint Kubiak this weekend. That's going to take place on Saturday. Raiders GM John Spytek was in Denver when the Broncos won a Super Bowl with Gary Kubiak, Klint's father, as head coach. Tom Brady's last 2 Fox games were Seahawks games, giving him an up-close look at Kubiak's offenses. A major emphasis in this search isn't just getting the head coaching hire right, but getting a clear, aligned vision for the entire coaching staff and what the organization experienced last year. Kubiak is believed to be the favorite, though no final determination has been made. It's also unclear whether Kubiak would fully take the job, as he's been with 5 teams in 5 years and is currently enjoying his most success. Before all this, the Raiders have very strong interest in Jesse Minter, who has Michigan ties, but he chose Baltimore again. Jordan Schultz, NFL Insider, NFL on Fox, kind of summarizing where the Raiders stood at this point of the game. And again, we all knew that Klint Kubiak is the leader in the clubhouse. Now, a lot has been made of the 5 teams in 5 years, and it's not really exactly the way it appears. You know, in the mirror in your car where it says, and I don't know if it even says it anymore, but like objects in mirror are closer than they appear, or whatever it is. It's not, and that's probably a terrible saying. You know, that doesn't have anything to do with this, so I just messed that one up. You can ring the bell on me if you want. But the point is, everything isn't really the way it appears, right? And the situation is the different places he's been. Yes, he's been in 5 different places in 5 years, but that's because he's been an offensive coordinator for different coaches that got fired. So he'd be on the staff, and then that staff got fired because they didn't have a lot of success. Not saying he didn't have good success as an OC or as a quarterback coach or a passing game coordinator. He had success. It's just his teams weren't having success, led by their head coach. And once they moved on from them, then that's when he got moved on from. So he was in New Orleans last year. They had a lot of success early on, and then they didn't. Right. And they were scoring 40 points per game, and then they weren't doing very well. And then that's when their head coach ended up getting fired, Dennis Allen. We all know that he ended up in Chicago as the defensive coordinator. Of course, he's doing his thing there. And then Kellen Moore ended up getting that head coaching job. Matter of fact, right after the Eagles won the Super Bowl. And so that's how that happened. And he was convinced to go to Seattle. Obviously, he's got a lot of success there. So all of Raider Nation right now is pretty nervous because, as I tweeted out, it feels like it's Kubiak or bust. Now, there's other options that the Raiders are going to be looking at. They have to have a plan B. They better have a plan C and a plan D, especially now that there's no Davis Webb. So with 2 jobs remaining, the Cardinals and the Raiders, what direction will the Raiders go if Klint Kubiak does not take the job, or he goes back to Seattle, or he ends up in Arizona? Either way, they don't get Seattle's offensive coordinator. What direction do they go next? We'll actually talk about that coming up in segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about a couple great sponsors we have here on the show, and the first one is TurboTax Full Service. You know what time of year it is, right? Tax season. It doesn't have to take over your life. This year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or the guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online, and they'll handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get every deduction that you would need. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. So for a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150 all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. So this is new, folks. Just file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. I also want to tell you about FanDuel. It is the last call for football on FanDuel. One final Sunday, one last kickoff, the final chance to get in on the action before the NFL season officially comes to a close. This is Super Bowl 60, and FanDuel is making sure you're right in the middle of it with a special offer just in time for the biggest game of the year. So whether you're backing the favorite, riding with the underdog, or building one last same-game parlay, this is the game everyone's been waiting for. This is where predictions turn into plays, stats turn into storylines, and every snap feels bigger. It's the perfect way to cap off the season and make the Super Bowl even more exciting from kickoff to the final whistle. Do you know that there's a prop bet on a touchdown pass from inside the 1 yard line? Right, which obviously is a troll job, right? Think about that. We all remember how the Seahawks lost to the Patriots the last time they played in the Super Bowl. Yeah, the pass that Russell Wilson attempted to make, and Malcolm Butler came up with the interception inside the 1 yard line. There's actually a bet that could be placed, and you can go to FanDuel.com and find out about it today. If you're a new customer, just bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets if you win. Make it count, because after the Super Bowl, the season, it's over. Last call for football on FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of Super Bowl 60. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. If not Klint Kubiak, then who? And look, this is the deal. The Raiders are meeting with Klint Kubiak on Saturday. I know that they're expecting to give him a huge offer, give him their final pitch, want to hear his final pitch on being the Raiders' next head coach. And I think that they have the inside track. The only thing I know is that there's a long time between Saturday and Super Bowl Sunday and Monday when he can officially be hired on February 9th. Like, there's a big time. There's a big gap, right? So you can come away from that presentation and like, man, I'm all in. I'm good, this and that. And then decide later on, oh, man, maybe not. Maybe I don't want to do this. It's almost like when you go to the car dealership and you see a car, you really like it, you test drive that bad boy, you're like, man, I got to get this car. Well, I just got to go home and get some things together, or go get the paperwork, or go get your trade in, bring it back, and we'll seal the deal, make it happen. And then you get home, and then you sit around for a while. Maybe you have dinner. Maybe you start talking to a friend. They're like, oh, yeah, I had one of those cars. I wasn't really a big fan of it. Then all of a sudden, the temperature goes down, right? I used to do sales. You know, we used to always have to close, especially like when I was selling Kirby's. Those are $2,000 vacuums. Right? You couldn't tell them, oh, I'll call you later. I'll call you back. Or let me think about it before I make a decision. I had to get them right away. I had to get them when they were hot and bothered and ready to get it. Right? If they wanted the Kirby then, I had to sell it. Because if not, if I walked away and gave them some cooling off time where they weren't thinking about it or thinking about why they needed it, as I just convinced them for the last hour and a half in their house, then it was easy for them to say, yeah, you know what, never mind. So that's how I look at this situation that's going to happen on Saturday. They're going to talk to him. They're going to give him a big offer. They're going to let him know that they want him to be their head coach, right? Everyone knows that Klint Kubiak is the guy. And there's a good chance that they're going to walk away from that meeting feeling great and feeling like, we got our guy. Cool. He's going to be the head coach to lead this team moving forward, and he's going to be the guy tasked with developing Fernando Mendoza into the National Football League. But what if he changes his mind between then and when he can actually sign the contract? Then what direction do the Raiders go? So Jeremy Fowler of ESPN tweeted on Thursday, eyes on Klint Kubiak for the Raiders job. But Panthers defensive coordinator Ejiro Evero is still in the mix there. Some candidates have been eliminated, but he has not. He conveyed detailed quarterback offensive plan in-person meeting with the Raiders. Raiders staff and Evero have Denver ties. So it's funny because we had a text just on Thursday's show about Evero, and I said, well, they could have hired him already if they wanted to hire him, so I didn't think that he was in the mix. Well, he hasn't been eliminated from the mix. He might not be the guy that they want, option A, but he hasn't been eliminated completely. So shout out to the texter that sent that in, because that was their gut feeling. And again, because they could have offered him the job already, that could have been signed, sealed, and delivered. He could have had his press conference already and gone about their business. Could have been in Mobile, Alabama at the Senior Bowl, and they didn't go that direction. So, all right, again, looking at it as Klint Kubiak or Davis Webb at that stage of the game. But now that Davis Webb is no part of the mix, now Evero is still part of the mix. So he's the Panthers defensive coordinator. He's done some good things. I've got people that cover Carolina Panthers. I've talked to them. They like what he's done for the most part. He's had some really good, defenses there in Carolina. They have some talent there. That's where Trayvon Merrick went. They've got J.C. Horn at the cornerback position. Now, the last drive that they had before they got eliminated from the playoffs against the Rams, as a matter of fact, was not very good. Played a lot of, soft zone. And I know that they didn't have all their guys out there, so they didn't want to take a chance of getting burned. But the Rams went right up and down the field and scored and ended up winning the game. So it wasn't the best resume builder, but he's a guy that has respect, just hasn't been talked about a whole lot. So Evero, he could be part of the mix. What if they don't go in that direction? What other names could be floating around that they could still be thinking about? Well, remember, they interviewed all the Rams guys. And again, as Jeremy Fowler said, some guys have been told that they've been eliminated from the mix. I don't know if any of these three have been eliminated, but I know we haven't heard about them in a while. Mike LaFleur, Rams offensive coordinator, Nate Shieldhouse, Rams passing game coordinator, and Chris Shula, Rams defensive coordinator. Those guys could all be firmly in the mix, or they might be out. It feels like if it's not going to be Kubiak, then it's going to be Evero. And he might end up being a really good coach, but I would hate the fact that the Raiders felt like that they were right there on the doorstep again of getting the guy that they really targeted, only to have to settle for someone else. And again, he might end up being a really good head coach. He might end up being the better option out of the two. But you want to be able to land the guy that you really want to target. And if you're Evero, you might not feel bad about getting the job that way. But remember, that's what Pete Carroll was. He was a fallback plan last year, and you know how well that worked out, right? They put all their eggs in the Ben Johnson basket, and it didn't work out. He went to Chicago, and then they were looking around like, okay, now what? So they ended up with Pete Carroll. So now it feels like all their eggs right now are in Klint Kubiak's basket. And if he decides not to take the job, and again, I do feel like he's going to, but I'm not going to lie, going to be in San Francisco next week for the week leading up to the Super Bowl, be there on Radio Row like I am each and every year. It is going to be a hectic week and almost a nerve-wracking style of week, right? There's going to be so much conversation going on there at the Moscone Center, so many NFL insiders, so many people following this story. And again, after Sunday, nothing could happen. There could be no interviews with teams. They can get a verbal agreement, but again, a verbal agreement is just that. So, I mean, I look at those names. Could there be a dark horse name out there that we don't even know? Sure. Right. I tweeted out, Kubiak or bust. And I had a back and forth on Twitter with a guy who was like, that's false. That's not true. There's plenty of guys out there. Sean McDermott's out there. Guess what? He's not coaching this year. Yeah, he'd be a great option. He's not coaching this year. Maybe if they need to, they can try to convince him to not take the year off and go coach. Maybe, but I wouldn't count on that. He said Mike Tomlin. Mike Tomlin's not coaching this year. He's doing TV. He might do like Bill Cowher and never get back to coaching. He just went 19 years in Pittsburgh, never had a losing season. I don't think he's got anything to prove. He's won a Super Bowl. He might get in that TV booth and be like, man, this is a cool job. I like this and no stress. I don't have to worry about hearing people say, fire him, fire him, fire him. I'm good. He's going to be great on TV. So, yeah, those are two options that I guess are technically out there because they don't have a job. But to me, they're not really available for the silver and black. I look at nothing but young guys. Kubiak obviously being the one that everyone is targeting. Evero is a guy that hasn't been a head coach yet. LaFleur hasn't been a head coach. Shieldhouse hasn't been a head coach, and Shula hasn't been a head coach. All of them are probably really good coaches. Very, not a big track record of what they could possibly do. Right? If they're Jesse Minter, who ended up being the head coach of the Baltimore Ravens, he was the defensive coordinator for the Chargers. If they don't mind going in a defensive direction, all right, maybe Shula or Evero are, fully in the mix because they don't mind going defense. But I think that offense would be the way that they would want to go, especially with the anticipation of Fernando Mendoza. But the one thing that stands out to me from Jeremy Fowler and what he did say is that when he's talking about Evero, he said he conveyed detailed quarterback offensive plan in the in-person meeting with the Raiders. So that obviously, and remember, he's met with them twice already. So that's something to think about. I don't know what that detailed quarterback offensive plan is, but obviously that's something that's very important. So it feels like if Kubiak doesn't take the job with the Raiders, then maybe look for Ejiro Evero to end up getting the job, the Panthers defensive coordinator. If not him, maybe LaFleur, maybe Shieldhouse, maybe Shula. But I don't even know if those guys are available in the mix for the Raiders at this stage of the game. So, it got late fast, didn't it, in this search? And again, they'll meet with Kubiak on Saturday, and hopefully their pitch is a much better pitch than the Cardinals, and he's overwhelmed, and he decides that's the direction he wants to go. If not, all bets are off on what they're going to do. Segment number 3 is coming up next. We'll hear from you, 707-654-4693. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about another great sponsor we have here on the show, and that is Indeed. If you've ever hired someone who looked good on paper but just wasn't the right fit, you know how important that is. When you want candidates who truly match what you're looking for, you have to trust Indeed-sponsored jobs. Hiring Indeed is all you need. Stop struggling to get your job post seen on other sites. Indeed-sponsored jobs put your post at the top of the page and help you reach the right candidates faster. If you need to hire someone, if I need to hire someone, I'm going to Indeed, and I've gone to Indeed, right? They'll give you real experience, not just a resume buzzword. Like, that's what you'll be looking for. You want the experience. So instead of struggling to get your job post seen, Indeed-sponsored jobs helps your listing stand out and reach quality candidates faster. And according to Indeed data, sponsored jobs posted directly on Indeed are 90% more likely to report a hire than non-sponsored jobs. And again, as a guy who uses Indeed, we do it at the radio station, it works just like that. Spend more time interviewing candidates who check all your boxes with less stress, less time, and more results using Indeed sponsored jobs. Listeners of this show, the Locked On Raiders podcast, get a $75 sponsored job credit to help give your job the premium placement it deserves at Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL. Just go to Indeed.com/LockedOnNFL right now and support the show by saying you heard about it right here. And, of course, what you heard about, Indeed. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts draft that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Before we get into that, though, definitely want to thank you so much for making this the first listen of the day. Starting things off, we get a call from Kevin in San Jose. He's calling to talk about Davis Webb pulling his name out of the Raiders head coaching search. Here's Kevin in San Jose.
Yo, Q, it's Kevin from San Jose. Yeah, I just was laying down, got the news that Davis Webb withdrew his name from the Raiders' consideration. I'm not too worried, but man, they better have that hidden handshake agreement by Saturday night or something, or it's looking real bad. But I do think we are going to get him. And, Davis Webb only had to wait 2 days or 3 days to really figure out if he was going to get that job or not. So maybe he heard something. I don't think he's tired of waiting. I just think that, he heard something or trusts his gut. But we got to get to the Super Bowl already. Not even that. We got to get to the Monday, the day after the Super Bowl already. But, yeah, I'm excited. We're all a little worried, but I think everything's going to be okay. Kevin Lee out from San Jose.
Kev, big Kev, thanks for the call, my man. And it's going to be a long week, brother, right? It's going to be a long week and some change. And they can agree to a deal on Saturday. They can have a handshake. They can give a bro hug. They can do whatever they want to do. They can spit on their hand and shake it. They can do whatever they want to do. But they can't sign paperwork, right? And so, yes, it's going to be a long time. And look, I guarantee you after Saturday, we're going to hear a report, oh, yeah, Klint Kubiak's, expected to be the next Raiders head coach if everything goes really well. We'll hear that. But even with that being said, anything could happen. So just buckle up and try not to stress off it because it's not worth stressing out. But, man, it's down to the wire. That is for sure. Thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Got a text from Gonzo Raider. Says, hey, Q, Gonzo Raider here. Quick question. Why isn't Sean McDermott considered for a head coaching position? Seems as if his name isn't floated around at all. That's from Gonzo Raider. And going back to what I said in segment number 2, he's not coaching this year. He's taking the year off. That's why you don't hear his name. I was kind of blown away by that as well. I asked a few people. I was like, hey, man, I haven't heard Sean McDermott's name. What's going on with that? Well, he was blown away by the fact that he got fired after the divisional round of the playoffs. Like, think about this. Think about there was 10 openings this year. Normally when you fire a coach and there's an opening there, that means the team was really bad. Like the Raiders, 3-14. The Cardinals, really bad team. Browns, really bad team, right? All these teams, Giants, really bad team. And we can just go on and on and on about the teams that are really bad. The Tennessee Titans, really bad, right? You had the Baltimore Ravens, who normally are always in the playoffs, fired their coach. You had the Pittsburgh Steelers, who Mike Tomlin never had a losing season, didn't fire him, but he walked away. And then you had the Buffalo Bills that went to the divisional round of the playoffs, right? They were one game away from the championship round, and they fired their coach. 8 seasons in the playoffs, 9 as the head coach there, but 8 times he took them to the playoffs and 5 times he won the division. He was fired, right? And so all of a sudden that just got flipped upside down. And it's just wild. So when he gets kind of blindsided like that, his hey, man, I'm going to sit out this year. Sit out, let Buffalo pay me, and, come back and get into the coaching cycle next year. So that's why, again, a lot of people want Sean McDermott. I don't blame them. Just doesn't look like something that's going to happen. But now, again, as I mentioned in segment 2, if Kubiak doesn't take the job for one reason or the other, and they're not comfortable with one of these other young guys that I'm talking about, maybe they put the full court press on and try to get Sean McDermott to, get up off the couch and head to Vegas and be the head football coach. I mean, again, that could be a desperation thing. Who knows? But that might be the, in case of emergency, break glass. Thanks so much for the text. I definitely appreciate you. Got a call from Jose from McAllen, Texas. He's calling to talk about Patrick Graham and also talk some Klint Kubiak. Here's Jose from McAllen, Texas.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is Jose calling from McAllen, Texas, representing the Raider Nation out here with all the Cowboys fans in South Texas. I saw the news about Patrick Graham joining the Pittsburgh Steelers as their defensive coordinator, and I'm a little bummed out about that. I was hoping that maybe we could give him another shot I think to me the defense it was playing okay. It was not great at times, but there were games where they did show up, and our offense just wasn't working well. So I'm a little bummed out about that. I wish they would have given him another chance with a competent offensive coordinator that's not Josh McDaniels. And now I guess I also saw the news about Kubiak doing that second interview, which I'm pretty excited about. Now I'm just hoping that since we lost PG, that maybe Robbie Leonard might step up and we might make him the DC. I'm hoping that PG doesn't take him along with him. I do hope that we at least keep some guys like him on our staff. So let me know what you think. Love what you guys do. You and Ari, keep doing your thing, and we'll keep hearing you guys every morning as we get on our way to work. Pete.
Big Jose, thanks for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, Patrick Graham met with the Steelers on Thursday. He's expected to. I saw Josina Anderson say that he'd verbally agreed to be the defensive coordinator of the Pittsburgh Steelers. So it seems like he's going to go. I hope he doesn't take Robbie Leonard with him, but you have to let the head coach decide who he wants to keep and who he doesn't. So we'll see what's going to happen sooner rather than later. The Raiders need their coach. And if it's Kubiak, they're not going to be able to get him till at least after the Super Bowl. They are going to meet with him on Saturday, though. So, as far as I'm concerned, they need to throw the whole kitchen sink at him and try to make him an offer he can't refuse. Like I said, 5 years, 6 years, $12 million to $15 million a year is what I believe that they're going to prepare to offer him. But again, we'll see what happens when it all plays out. So thanks so much for the call. Definitely appreciate you. Just got time for a couple more. This text is from Willits Raider. He says, hey, Q, new booty. It's Willits Raider here. Been listening for the last years plus. With all the stuff I've been hearing from you about how some interviews are for coordinator positions, with Webb not being hired at the second interview and Shieldhouse not having the experience, I believe Kubiak has always been the guy, and they want to bring one of those guys in for OC. Once Broncos got a sniff of what they were doing, they fired their OC. Everyone's trying to keep their talent. Let me know what you think. That's from Willits Raider. Thanks so much for the text. And yeah, and there's something to be being said about that. I do believe some of the coordinators that have come in and interviewed with the Raiders are guys that were potentially offensive coordinators or potentially defensive coordinators. I think Brian Daboll was definitely an offensive coordinator interview. I think that that they had Mike McDaniel as a possible offensive coordinator. And I know that they worded it as a head coach, but I think OC was what they really rather those guys be. And they were looking at these guys like a Davis Webb, obviously a Klint Kubiak as a potential head coach. Now we know Davis Webb is out of the mix, so he's not going to be part of it. Now it's all about Klint Kubiak. And if not him, then one of the guys that I mentioned in segment number 2. So thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. We'll close out with a call from EPMD. He's calling to talk about the voting for the Pro Football Hall of Fame, coming off the heels of Bill Belichick not being selected as a first ballot Hall of Famer. Here's EP.
Yo, Q, it's EP. Go ahead and say it. Hey, man, far be it from me to ever defend a Patriot, especially Bill Belichick. But what the heck is going on with the Hall of Fame voting? Do you have any insight into what these jokers are doing? First we got Shadur being selected to the Pro Bowl. Now we're not recognizing the coach that's won more Super Bowls than anyone else in history, not being elected to the front. What's going on? Is it who is this voting panel? I thought this was people that knew what they were doing, and another step in the line of all the great Raiders that we've seen not get elected when they deserve to be. It doesn't make any sense to me. I think I read somewhere that we've got tech bros and lobbyists that are allowed to vote. Is that what's going on here? Just everything's for sale now and people can go in and be as biased as they'd like to. If you got any insight, I'd love to. I think I saw that Eli Manning missed out too. It's crazy to me. Any insight you got, I appreciate you, man. Thanks for everything you do. Cheers.
EP, thanks so much for the call. Appreciate you. And yeah, the conversations I've had and what I've read, it just sounds like the guys were campaigning to not vote for Bill. He needed 40 out of 50 votes and he fell short. So at least 11 people chose not to vote for him. It's agenda-based, politics. He'll get in next year. That's no doubt. But it's a logjam now at that position. And there's I don't know. It's a mess because there's only one coach that gets in, possibly per year. And so now, like I said, it's a logjam. But as far as the voters, there's 50 well-distinguished pro football writers or contributors. You can't buy your way into that. It's an honor. But it did feel very Cooperstown-like, right? The voters who vote for baseball Hall of Famers always seem to have some agenda to point to. And sometimes there's not even a class. Sometimes they're like, all right, who's going to go into Cooperstown? Oh, there's no class this year. Like, what? There's nobody that can go in the Hall of Fame? Like, it's just wild. So that's what it felt like when they kept Bill out. And all it did made me think of is all the Raiders that aren't in, right? Guys, like, if you're going to keep Bill out on the first ballot when we know that an 8-time Super Bowl champ is a first ballot Hall of Famer, then how is Lester Hayes going to get in, right? How's Jim Plunkett going to get in? How is Steve Wisniewski going to get in? How are these other guys? You know what I mean? Like, there's so many Raiders that I feel like could be in Canton, Ohio and aren't. And you're leaving this guy out based off agenda? And I get it. I get Spygate. I get Deflategate. But that's an 8-time Super Bowl champ. Anyone thinks that he wasn't the greatest coach of all time and one of the greatest coaches of all time is crazy, right? And before they had the earpieces in the headset, everybody was stealing signs, right? Even going back to baseball, right? Everybody was looking for an advantage. Now, I know, again, I'm not condoning what they did, but, man, okay, so that's maybe 2 Super Bowls. He still won 6. So really successful guy. But, again, it was a handful of dudes that decided that they were going to not let him get in on the first ballot. So it kind of is what it is, but it does provide a logjam for everybody else moving forward. So that's going to do it for today's show. It's going to do it for the week, and it's going to do it for the last show from Studio Q. Next time we have this show, it'll come to you live from San Francisco, the Moscone Center, all week long, all week strong. I'll be out there ready for Super Bowl 60, getting you all the interviews, getting you all the sounds, bringing as much of it as I can to the podcast, and hopefully get some really good Raider information and content, and maybe get some really good news about the head coaching search and Klint Kubiak. So until Monday, Raider Nation, take care of yourself, take care of your family, enjoy your weekend. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.